With Wicked trending everywhere now, it's the perfect time to take a closer look at the untold stories surrounding the original film. And trust me, they are far from magical. From dangerous stunts to mistreatment of actors, all the way to Return to Oz, the terrifying sequel you probably haven't heard about. We have a lot to cover, so make sure you stick around until the end to see how it all ties back to Wicked. First, let's talk about the injuries and dangers during filming. It's no exaggeration to say that the set was downright hazardous. Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch of the West, suffered serious injuries during the infamous fire scene, where she had disappeared in a puff of smoke. The trapdoor she was supposed to escape through malfunctioned, and the flames scorched her, leaving her with second and third degree burns. Her green makeup, made from toxic copper-based paint as well, had to be scraped off because removing it normally would have damaged her skin even more. The Tin Man wasn't safe either. Originally played by Buddy Ebsen, the metallic makeup contained aluminium dust, which coated his lungs and caused him to be hospitalized. When Jack Haley replaced him, the makeup was changed to an aluminium paste, but it still caused an eye infection. To make things worse, his suit was made of actual metal, so he couldn't sit down. During filming, he had to lean against a board whenever he needed to rest. Ray Bolger, the Scarecrow, didn't escape unscathed either. His makeup and prosthetics were so tightly applied that they left deep marks in his face, some of which lingered for months after the production ended. Burt Lair, who played the Cowardly Lion. His costume was made from an actual lion's hide, weighing a whopping 90 pounds. With no ventilation, he was constantly sweating, and by the end of each day, the costume had to be dried because it was completely soaked. Eating was no easier. His makeup was so elaborate that he couldn't eat solid food on set, and had to survive on milkshakes and soup. Then there's Judy Garland, who played Dorothy. The treatment she endured was absolutely heartbreaking. At just 16 years old, she was forced to swallow an extreme diet of coffee, cigarettes, and soup to maintain her weight. She was also given amphetamines to keep her energized during long filming days, and at night she was given medication to help her sleep, a practice that she had actually already been subjected to in earlier films. This then led to a lifelong struggle with addiction. Garland also earned far less than her male co-stars, despite being the film's lead. To make matters even worse, the director, Victor Fleming, once slapped her on set when she couldn't stop laughing during a scene. Can you imagine the outrage if something like that happened today? Now let's talk about the Munchkins. Over the years, many rumors have circulated about their behavior on set. Stories of drunken partying to inappropriate conduct have become part of the film's lore, though most of these claims have been exaggerated or outright debunked. One of the most infamous rumors is the so-called Munchkin hanging scene. Many believed a shadowy figure in the background of the forest scene was an actor who took their life. But apparently it was just a bird, a crane that was brought in to make the set look more realistic. There are very few copies of the original scene, and some people who own the original production on tape have said that they can tell that it's a hanging scene, and this was all just a cover-up, but form your own opinions on that. While Judy Garland herself joked about the Munchkins being rowdy in interviews, their families have since worked hard to clear their names and challenge these long-standing myths. There's a lot of stories about issues between the Munchkins and Judy Garland herself, stuff that Judy Garland's partner has also said, but again, all of that is just alleged and none of it has actually been proven. A lot of it has also been debunked, so again, take with that what you will. And if you thought that the strangeness of Wizard of Oz ended with the films, think again. In 1970, the Land of Oz theme park opened in the small town of Beach Mountain, North Carolina. At first glance, it seemed like a dream come true, but its story turned out to be anything but magical. Robbins, the developer, envisioned a place where families could walk through Dorothy's journey in the Land of Oz. The park featured a life-size replica of Dorothy's farmhouse, a yellow brick road, and attractions like the Emerald City, a poppy field, and animatronic versions of the beloved characters like the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion. I swear, nothing good ever happens with animatronics, hey? On opening day, the Land of Oz drew over 20,000 visitors. a huge success for a park in such a remote location. At its peak, the park attracted hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. However, trouble started brewing behind the scenes not long after it opened. Robbins, the visionary behind the park, passed away shortly before it opened. Without his leadership, the park struggled to maintain its early success. Additionally, the remote location of Beach Mountain made it difficult to attract consistent crowds. The biggest blow came in 1975, when a devastating fire destroyed much of the park. Dorothy's house and parts of Emerald City were severely damaged, and some of the park's most valuable artifacts, including original costumes from the film, were stolen during the chaos. After the fire, the park limped along for a few more years. By the early 1980s, the Land of Oz had closed its doors. In recent years, the park has reopened for special events like the Autumn at Oz. Despite these efforts, the park retains an off vibe. Many visitors have described the experience as more unsettling than enchanting. Adding to this, the rumors still persist that the park is haunted. Now, the part you've been waiting for, Return to Oz, the nightmare follow-up. If you've ever watched Return to Oz, you might have wondered, who thought this was a good idea for kids? Released in 1985, Return to Oz is a dark and unsettling sequel to The Wizard of Oz. Based more closely on L. Baum's original novels, The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz. Oops. This sequel was nothing like its predecessor. No cheerful songs or technicolor fantasy. Instead, audiences were met with a bleak dystopian Oz, and a story that many considered straight up disturbing. When I was researching this, I saw some scenes, and bro, this would have terrified me as a child. Set 6 months after Dorothy's original trip to Oz, Return to Oz begins with a traumatized Dorothy. Unable to stop talking about her experiences in Oz, referenced PTSD. Her Aunt Em, worried about Dorothy's mental state, takes her to a doctor for electroshock therapy. A very intense start for a children's movie. During the procedure, a storm knocks out the power, and Dorothy escapes the hospital, only to find herself swept back to Oz. But the Oz she returns to is nothing like the magical land she remembers. The Emerald City is in ruins, its inhabitants turn to stone, and the once vibrant kingdom is ruled by the terrifying Gnome King and the equally creepy Princess Mombi, a villain with a collection of severed heads. Like, what the hell? Among the film's most unsettling moments are the Wheelers, creepy maniacal creatures with wheels for hands and feet. They screech and laugh as they chase Dorothy through the desolate ruins of Oz, setting the tone for the film's nightmarish atmosphere. And when I tell you, I was terrified when I saw these guys. Dorothy doesn't face this peril alone though. She's joined by a group of strange new friends. TikTok, a wind-up mechanical soldier, Jack Pumpkinhead, a lanky scarecrow-like figure with a pumpkin for a head, checks out, and Gump, a flying creature made from a sofa, tree branches, and a mounted moose head. Together, they set out to stop the Gnome King and save Oz. The climax takes place in the Gnome King's lair, where Dorothy and her companions are forced to play a high-stakes guessing game to free the Scarecrow and others who have been turned into ornaments. Each wrong guess leads to another friend being transformed, raising the stakes with every attempt. Eventually, Dorothy's quick thinking allows her to win the game, restore her friends, and defeat the Gnome King. The film ends with Dorothy freeing Princess Ozma, the rightful ruler of Oz, who had originally been imprisoned by Mombi. Behind the scenes, Return to Oz was a passion project for Walter Murch. Murch wanted to create a film that was truer to Baum's darker, more surreal vision of Oz, rather than replicate the style of the 1939 classic. The production was filled with challenges that nearly derailed the film entirely. The film's production was plagued by budget constraints and studio interference. The film relied heavily on practical effects and stop-motion animation, particularly for the Gnome King and his minions. While impressive for the time, these effects were painstakingly slow and expensive to produce. The result was a visually stunning but financially draining production process. Murch's vision of Oz as a decayed, dangerous world alienated many viewers. Test audiences found the film too frightening, and parents were outraged by the intense imagery, including the severed heads in Mombi's castle and the shock therapy scenes. The film received a PG rating, but many argued it should have been rated higher for its disturbing content. When Return to Oz hit theaters, it flopped. Financially, the film was a disaster, earning only $11 million against a $28 million budget. Over time, however, the film has developed a cult following, tying it back to Wicked. As the Wicked movie adaptation approaches, or now that it's actually been released at the time of this video, it's hard not to wonder if history might repeat itself. Will it soar like the 1939 original, or stumble under the weight of its ambition like Return to Oz? One thing's for sure. The world of Oz continues to captivate and sometimes horrify audiences in ways no one could have anticipated. Whether it's the original film's injuries and mistreatment, the eerie remains of a failed theme park, or the divisive legacy of Return to Oz, the magic of Oz always comes with the dark side.